Good evening. I call to order the organizational meeting of the Cave Creek Unified School District number 93. It's Monday, January 10th, 2022, and it's 6 o'clock, and we are live. Item 1.2, roll call. All 5 board members are present, and there is a quorum. Present from the leadership team are Dr. Monroe, Dr. Jensen, Ms. Rodriguez, and Ms. Scott. Item 1.3, formal adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda as presented. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained. Motion carries. The agenda is adopted as presented. Item 1.4, call to fill out forms for call to the public, and it looks like we have one, so the admonition will be read in a couple minutes. Item 1.5, Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Item 2, presentation of awards for schools and departments. There are none. Item 3, public comments. All right. According to ARS 38-431.01H, governing board members may not discuss or take legal action on matters raised during an open call to the public. The only allowable responses a governing board member may make are: number 1, board member may respond if there is a direct criticism of the board member; 2, board member may direct staff to look into a matter; or 3, board member can ask to have this item placed on a future agenda. Speakers need to be mindful of what they say when presenting to the board. Inappropriate comments could be considered slanderous. And we have Dennis Riley, and 3 minutes.
Good evening. This is my first board meeting here in Cave Creek. I'm a former principal and teacher in Paradise Valley, and so I'm kind of familiar with what goes on at a board meeting. And my comment tonight, or actually, could I preview it with a question? When was the last time that the mask requirements and COVID protocols have been discussed and acted on?
Do you want to respond to that, Dr. Monroe?
Boy, I think it was just a few months back. I think we had talked about it maybe in November, October maybe.
October.
Okay, considering the spread as quickly as it has come on us and appears to going to present a whole lot of problems for all of us, I think that it would be appropriate for you folks to revisit this at the next meeting, making it an agenda item. And so for the protection of staff and students and community, that might be an appropriate thing to do. That was my request for tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. When will you decide whether it's an agenda item?
Normally what we do right now is not a Q&A. So
There's a process the board will go through to decide whether it needs to go onto the agenda or not at a future meeting.
And generally, when does that take place?
It's hard to say. It could possibly be if a board member wants it at the next meeting, or it could be in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
thank you. Item 4, presentations, information reports. 4.1, communication, site visitation, and board meeting norms and protocols for governing board members, presented by Dr. Court Monroe.
Thank you, President Hatcher and members of the board. As we're here for the 2022 organizational meeting tonight, and I have now worked with the board for a little over a year, I think it's apropos to update our communication and site visit protocol to revisit it. In addition, board members Fortney and Walker have completed their first year as well on the board. By way of context, the document that the board sees has been used and revised over time since 2007 by past superintendent and board teams. The last time it was revised was in 2019 of June. ASBA had representatives to present on effective governing board principles, among other things, and the board discussed or had presentations on these topics in January, February, March, and April of 2019. Then it was approved in June of 2019. I will say I feel like the board members have done a very good job with these, and this has been very evident in my first year. In fact, Member Brown today had even emailed me to let me know of a time he was going to be on the campus. I've also added a new document that's titled Board Meeting Norms and Protocols. Norms are intended to be standards that are set for professional behavior and allows the public to understand what you expect of yourselves. By way of note, we've also recently created norms and protocols for all Ccusd employees that will be brought to the board for approval at the meeting later this month. These board norms and protocols, the ones that we'll look at, were derived from 4 sources. First, they reference the 2019 document that the board's been working under. Second, board policy and legal consultation. Third, input from the board from the 2021 self-evaluation that the board did this past summer. And then fourth, best practices of other Arizona governing board superintendent teams from around the state. I'd like to review briefly and discuss with the board tonight and hopefully approve this document at the January 24th board meeting. How we'll do this is a member of the cabinet will read each section aloud, and we'll stop after each of the 4 sections and discuss, open up for questions, clarify, or revise if needed. So if you have the document in front of you, I see that you do. So let's start with Mrs. Scott, if you want to read that first section and then stop after where we discussed.
Communication, site visitation, and board meeting norms and protocols for governing board members. Communication protocol, established February 2007, revised March 2008, August 2009, August 24th, 2010, February 25th, 2014, June 24th, 2019, January 24th, 2022. We will maintain an atmosphere of respect for one another and attempt at all times to work together as a team in order to operate as advocates for our students, parents, and our district to move district goals forward. Superintendent Cabinet to Governing Board Communication. The superintendent will update the governing board members through weekly, bi-weekly updates, except during times of less frequent news, i.e. winter, spring, and summer breaks, as well as through email updates and phone calls as necessary by the superintendent, executive assistant, and or cabinet members, individual meetings, and or the use of a board auto dial when needed. It is important that the board members read the update to stay current on upcoming calendar events, ongoing district happenings, and the areas of potential concern. The superintendent or designee will notify the board members as soon as possible regarding incidents that are deemed as school or community emergencies, i.e. lockdowns. This is one part of support, not surprises. The board will be notified within 24 hours of the following: fire, police dispatch, medical emergency, and or imminent issue with student staff safety. The superintendent will make every attempt to provide governing board agenda and supporting information to board members by the Wednesday before the board meeting in as much as the information is available on board docs. If not all backup materials are available on Wednesday, a second drop of materials will be made when they become available and no later than 24 hours before the meeting. Questions regarding board materials can be directed to the superintendent. Superintendent Cabinet will, as much as possible, maintain the practice of support, not surprises. Periodic communications, updates on progress on the strategic plan, student achievement data following standardized testing, and other assessments.
So at this point, let's discuss that first section. If there's questions or clarifications or things that we'd like to talk about now. I know this looks very similar to what it was before, so.
This looks different than the attachment we were given on Friday. At least, this is what I printed out from what you sent us on Friday.
In the board update?
Yeah.
So what I had, what I sent on Friday was in response to a question from a board member that was asking from the
Okay.
one from
Got it.
the latest one. So there could be a comparison of like the changes or the
Okay.
adjustments between this and that one.
I've got both of them.
So that will look a little different than probably what you're seeing on the screen there.
Gotcha.
So for this first section, what actually is new to it?
What's new, I think you'll see instead of executive leadership team, you'll see the word cabinet. That's what we call our formerly the ELT. Let me look through some of the strike-throughs. Some of the things we're stricken through. On number 4, there was some language that was taken off for clarification electronically by email, internet download, or other electronic media. And then we changed AZ merit because that exam will not, on number 6, that exam will no longer exist. We'll have a new state assessment moving forward. All right, Dr. Jensen, would you like to read the second section, please?
Absolutely. Governing Board to Superintendent and Cabinet Communication. Number 1, questions about the weekly/bi-weekly update should go to the Superintendent. Number 2, board meetings with questions on agenda items should make every attempt to contact the Superintendent no later than Monday morning with the question to be asked. This does not preclude the member from asking the question at the board meeting, but it does allow administration the time to research the question and provide answers at the meeting. Number 3, board members with questions or concerns about any school or district operations may contact the appropriate cabinet member via email, copying the superintendent, rather than going directly to the staff members. Board members may have verbal conversations, either in person or via phone, with the cabinet with questions. It is expected that members of the cabinet share the information exchanged during verbal conversations with the superintendent. Number 4, the superintendent shall be contacted if the question involves a task or request for information. The task/information requested should be within the sphere of current board work or the strategic plan. Given the limited resources and time staff has available, board member requests for information outside the scope of current board work or the strategic plan or tasks requiring extensive staff time to compile and complete may be placed on a board agenda for a vote of the whole board before the request is fulfilled. All board members will be copied on the completed task. Number 5, governing board members will, as much as possible, maintain the practice of support, not surprises. Number 6, governing board members will forward public email communication and concerns to superintendent for follow-up/resolution. They may acknowledge receipt of the communication, but not respond to community members/parents in any substantial way to the content seen to them.
Any questions, thoughts, discussion?
In 3, the last sentence in 3, I know what you mean, but I think it can be misconstrued because there's not a comma in a certain place. It's expected that members of the cabinet share the information exchanged during verbal conversations with the superintendent. With the way that reads, one can interpret that to mean that cabinet are sharing information to whom I don't know. I mean, I do know, but the way it's with the lack of that punctuation. So exchanging cabinet conversation with the superintendent. You see what I'm saying?
Sure.
And I think what you mean, it's that board members, if we speak to cabinet, or the cabinet members are to share that with the superintendent. Is that what the intent of this?
Yes, yeah, President Hatcher, I kind of see what you're saying. We can do a little wordsmith there to make it a little more, to make it more clear for that meaning. But yeah, that's what it's getting after.
And I might just be nitpicking, but I think a comma between the word conversations and with would solve it. Because then we know we're not necessarily privy to conversations between the cabinet and the superintendent. Like I said, I could be nitpicking on that.
Okay, Mrs. Rodriguez, do you want to read the next section?
Yes. Governing board member site visit protocol adopted. Board members are encouraged to attend as many school events, sporting events, fine arts events, community events as a spectator as their time permits. Visits to school or department sites by governing board members during normal operating hours are potentially a distraction to the school site employees because of their elected position. As such, at times they may be negatively affect the proper function of the school or the department site as well as school site employees' daily responsibilities, unless such a site visits are infrequent, scheduled, and announced in advance. Although governing board members may visit a site to promote community organization or an event, they are still perceived as a governing board member and are expected to follow the protocol below. Governing board members are required to schedule school and department site visits that are intended to occur during normal operating hours with the secretary to the governing board at least 3 days in advance of such a visit. They must comply with all policies and procedures for the school or department site visits by members of the public. Number 2, site visits for the governing board members are intentional to their role as a parent, incidental.
Incidental, yeah.
Incidental to their role as a parent of the Ccusd students or community volunteers are not intended to be part of this protocol. All such visits are allowed as needed, are not required to be scheduled or announced, and should be focused solely on parent/student/teacher or volunteer issues. Number 3, attendance at after-school hour events at school sites should be communicated to the secretary. Number 4, governing board members will each adopt a school for event participation. As part of this program, the governing board member will try to attend special events at their adopted school, showing support for the school, staff, and school community. Governing board members will inform the board secretary of their attendance so that appropriate notification can be made to staff. Board members will be afforded access. Number 5, board members will not be afforded access to campuses or departments that have not been pre-arranged. Number 6, members of the public and governing board members will comply with board policies regarding site visits and the facilities use agreements. Arizona Revised Statute, Section 15-1105, CCUSD Policy KF.
That's very similar to the one that the board's been working under from 2019 as well. Are there questions or clarifications, discussion that needs to happen?
Maybe since currently I'm the only one with kids in the school, would it be helpful if I also give what things I'm attending as a parent? So to inform the community if multiple people end up being there, or how's the best way to do that? Because next year I have 3 kids I've got kids at 3 different schools.
That's true. That's true. Well, number 2 speaks to that a little bit because you are a parent. Notification always helps. I don't, that one kind of clears you as a parent, if you will. But again, I would say as a longtime former principal of many years, it was always nice to have notification courtesy-wise from the district office when a board member was going to be on campus. Is it necessary when you go to a parent-teacher conference as a parent? Probably not. However, I do think it's a good common courtesy in other instances for the board to do that. So, but as I mentioned, number 2 kind of clears you, Brianna, as a parent. But it certainly doesn't hurt. Drop an email to Julie if you're at an event, and I know I like to know because if I'm there, I like to recognize the board. I always have you guys wave or recognize if you're at an event as well, if you're in the crowd.
Can I ask a question on item number 3? The current protocol document, item number 3, is a much longer paragraph, and now it's been shortened up to basically a sentence. My concern is the prior protocols went as item number 3, school events for which site administrator has issued invitations to governing board members or after-school hour events at school sites do not require any additional scheduling or announcement. However, governing board members should notify board secretary at least 48 hours prior to the event of attendance or non-attendance to allow for appropriate notification of a quorum of board members attending the event. Now, that's been changed down to just a single sentence that goes, attendance at after-school hour events at school sites should also be communicated to the secretary. Can you give some background on why that paragraph got condensed down to a sentence, and now prior or currently after-hour school events did not require or do not require any additional scheduling or announcement, and now it looks like it does?
Sure. Yes, Member Brown. That one was, I was trying to find some simplicity in when do we notify and when do we not, because it started to become very complicated for when do I notify if I'm supposed to be there, or when do I not notify if I'm to go to this event or that event. And to purely simplify it, I just thought it would be good courtesy-wise just to notify for all the events, because it just got a little complicated, I thought. If the board feels, we can certainly revert to the former language. I just felt like, hey, if I'm heading to the volleyball game, I'd drop an email to the secretary from my phone or whatever, so the principal could be made aware or what have you. So instead of going through this qualifies as this, this one doesn't qualify as this one doesn't qualify, I just thought a blanket statement of just notification would be best. But again, I'm open to reverting or changing that back if the board sees fit. The intention is certainly not to create hoops. The intention is just to have good communication. It's always nice if the leader is aware of who's on campus, especially of a board member, because although board members don't have individual authority, let's face it, you're looked at differently. And as I mentioned, I just know my experience as a principal when a board member is on campus, my ears were up and I wasn't sure, and it could have been the most benign reason why a board member was there, just to be at a sporting event. But so to answer your question, that's why I kind of, instead of going through, does this scenario fit this one? Does this scenario fit this one? Does this scenario fit this one? I just condensed it to that one sentence.
Well, on the new board documents site, I see we've already posted, it looks like a very generic blanket, more than a quorum of board members may be attending, and their lists maybe 6 or 8 different types of events. So that's kind of now the blanket, instead of issuing one for the events like we had done in the past. The wording on this proposed document with number 3, attendance at after-school hour events at school sites should also be communicated to secretary. Well, you don't place the piece in there. These are public events open to the public that anybody may attend, say a basketball game, a play at the Fine Arts Center with the drama club, any play at Black Mountain Elementary with their drama department. So these are open to the public. So say at 6:45, I get the idea, hey, there's a basketball game tonight at 7 o'clock at the high school, I'm going to roll up there. So now I have to jump through the hoop that says, oh, now I have to email or text someone to say, oh, I'm going to be up here at the basketball game at 7 o'clock. I'm going to walk into the gym, I'm going to sit in the stands, probably won't talk to anybody. I'm not there to conduct business because as a governing board member, I have no authority. I'm just Joe Public going to a basketball game. So I think this number 3, we really need to take another look at this, because as that is, I almost feel like we're being penalized by being governing board members.
Sure. Member Brown, I can see that. I can definitely take another stab at it and add some clarification that encompasses, like you said, hey, I have some time tonight, I'd like to go to the volleyball game, but I haven't told them 2 days ago. So we can find some language and a soft spot in between. So that, yeah, again, we're not trying to create hoops. It's all because of courtesy and notification, but I get it. Something might cancel, you might be available and you want to go to the game. So we can probably find some language to capture that, or maybe we go back or clarify the previous language. We can certainly do that.
I mean, I would hope that the administration and cabinet would appreciate board members attending the after-hour events that do not need invitations and or confirmations for us that we're attending. So, for this to change from the current protocol, I think we should really go back and change that back to what the current protocol says. That would at least be manageable from a governing board member to attend these events and not, because at that rate, if I have to contact 6 other people to go, I'm not going. And then that's a bad look for me as a board member to not show up and support the drama club or the basketball team or whatever the case may be. But I don't want to have to jump through the hoops to do it.
Noted.
There's not been an
I think
issue,
it's-
as far as I know, in the 3 years that I've been on the board, there's not been an issue. I don't go on campuses without prior notification. I do attend public events as I'm allowed to as a member of the public. So I just feel this is really targeting maybe not all the current board members, but maybe a specific number of board members, and I don't think that's right or fair.
Noted. Well, Member Brown, I appreciate the input. That's certainly not the intention of it. If you look a few paragraphs on top, board members are encouraged to as many as school events. We want you to be at those events. So we can go back and look at that language before it's approved or anything at the next board meeting and bring that to you to capture some of those points that you brought up.
I do like the simplicity of this, though, because being new to the board, there was many times when I went and sent an email to Ms. Scotto saying, what do I do? Do I do this? Do I not? Should I do this for this game? Should I do this for this event? And so just having something nice and simple would just make it really perfect for it.
Yeah, and I mean, giving that number 2 kind of gives me an out. I think the point of this is courtesy and so that everybody's on the same page. So I appreciate it because I know there's lots of things that I try to attend as just a parent where I have another role as well. So being cognizant of that.
Could we, to sort of capture what all 3 of them are saying, could we somehow word it that if we possibly think there's a remote chance we could attend something, we could 3 days out to be consistent with, if you're going to use 3 days, say, I may attend, and if I attend, I attend. If I don't, I don't. And that way, at least, even if we decide at the last minute, we've covered ourselves.
Ed, does number 3 include a 3-day, though? I don't think it does.
It doesn't. That's why I
right?
just
That's
said
just a-
3-day, just to
that's
be
just a
consistent
heads up.
with.
I mean,
Number
at
one.
that, if that's what we're going to do, then beginning of the school year, I may attend all of the events. Here's my notification, and if I show up, I show up, and if I don't, I don't. That's what it really boils down to. I hear what everybody's saying, and parts and pieces I agree with everybody. One of the things that stands out about this, actually there's a lot, but speaking to what everybody else said, you want us to go to these events in a way, to go to a football game or a basketball game, it's now becoming cumbersome to go. And it's more of an incentive not to go because, frankly, most of the time when I've showed up at a football game, it's been 10 minutes before I left the house, or maybe it's, game starts in 15 minutes. I can be there. And I'm walking out the door to go to the game. And so it's not, I have nothing to hide. If I go, I tell everybody I went. But the way that this is written, it's sort of subtly is okay, we want you to go, but we're going to make it a little more cumbersome. You got to do these things in order to attend. And I don't think you are envisioning at beginning of the school year, okay, I may attend all of the events. There's my blanket, notification. I may show up and I may not. If that's what you want us to do, I'm certainly happy to do that.
Yeah, Member Busby, members of the board, I appreciate all the input. That's why we bring this document to you tonight. I think we can definitely work on number 3 and bring that back at the next meeting so that it has better clarity and intention to it. Most of the other elements on here are from what the board's currently working under from 2019, but to Member Brown's point, we can definitely add or wordsmith or revert to number 3 after hearing all your input to change the language so it's maybe not so restrictive on some of those things. I think I really appreciate the input. It's well received.
Number 3 also isn't worded very smartly, because if somebody could read that, it doesn't necessarily limit or doesn't state school-sponsored events. For example, this past Saturday morning, I went up to the Falcon Stadium to attend, didn't run, but I attended the Cave Creek Unified Education Foundation's Run the District 5K run. So that was a public event. Anybody could attend. But if you read number 3 as written, I would have had to notify. I didn't decide to go up there until either late Friday night or early Saturday morning. I don't remember. I just said, hey, I'm going to run up here and see what's going on, show a little support to CCUEF, because it's a great organization and they do great things for our district. So at that point, then I would have had to notify somebody that as a public person, I'm going to go up here and stand around for 40 minutes and talk to, I talked to a couple of vendors. I talked to a teacher or two that was there that had ran. I talked to another parent, maybe, just say hi. It's no big deal. I don't understand why you're trying to screw down the access of board members to the public. Because when it's all said and done, it's the public that we have their support to be up here on the dais. The public, our voters, are who elect us. And if it gets to the point where I can't even attend an event, whether it's a school event or, as this is written, even a non-school event, you've taken all the access away from us who represent the voters. So without having to give notification and jump through the hoop, and I just don't think this is anything that should be changed, at least not to what this proposed document is stating.
Thank you.
I have a few questions, and forgive my ignorance on this, but why is this coming to the board now? I mean, this is the middle of the school year. Typically, something like this, especially knowing that is there an election in 2022?
Yes.
Okay. There's an election in 2022. So there may be possibly a newly seated board. So why are we changing things now? And we have a lot of issues to deal with in the school district. Why has something happened that's prompted this and making it an immediate issue? I would think that with all of the other things that are of great importance in our district, that perhaps this would be something that would be better addressed with a newly seated board as opposed to right now. I mean, our focus is to educate our kids, keep them as safe as possible, and, provide, an outstanding learning environment. So, and we have financial issues, where's the enrollment going? So in light of all of the things that are going on, we're going to focus on doing this now. Has something happened that's all of a sudden created an issue that we need to talk about this right now?
Member Busby, to answer your question, when I was hired initially and we kind of had our hair on fire a little bit, we were really focused on keeping our schools open, and we haven't ever had this conversation while I've been the superintendent over these norms and protocols. And I thought the organizational meeting would be a good time to do it, as it was a shorter meeting, especially in light of Member Fortney and Member Walker kind of completing their first year, just to revisit and to be able to update these moving forward, even though it is an election year. But it would be my idea to look at these and revisit these, just to make sure we're current on them every year with new board members. So nothing happens, but I thought it was time that we did that. I've completed my first year working with the board. It's been a really good first year. We've been able to do a lot of really good things, especially during a challenging time. So, but there wasn't one significant thing that triggered this. I just thought it would be a good time, as we're organizing a new president and vice president, to just revisit the current protocol.
Okay, well, what I guess I'm not quite understanding is the superintendent is hired by the board. So in essence, you're our employee. The last time this was addressed in 2019, this was brought forward by the board. It wasn't the superintendent. So now, in effect, the superintendent is telling us how we have to behave, which, I'm taking a step back from this, looking at it as employee, employer. So the employee is telling the employer how to conduct themselves to a degree, and I'm having a hard time understanding that.
Member Busby, that's certainly not the intention at all. I just figured we would look at the current, what the board was working under, and I became familiar with these a few months back, so that we could revisit in light of 2 new board members as well completing their first year, just to make sure we were all on the same page with how we were going to work as a superintendent board team. So that certainly isn't the intention.
In 2019, when we visited this, we had multiple meetings with ASBA, and it was, I don't want to say it was excruciating, it was a very detailed discussion that we had with ASBA. 3 of the people that are sitting on this board were part of it, and to the best of my knowledge, those same 3 people that are here now, we had consensus. And what we agreed upon, we were all good with. And the reason that we had ASBA come was to give us the perspective, a broader perspective. ASBA, you work with all of these school districts across the state. You bring us a perspective that us sitting here, we're somewhat limited because we're here and we're not working directly with other school districts. So when we had these multiple meetings, workshops, whatever you want to call them, we had lots of questions that were asked. There was a lot of back and forth as far as open discussion that was of great value, and we came away with a document that, as a board, for us, how we're going to operate, it was a consensus. So now, I'm sitting here and it's like, okay, you don't like the way we operate, is kind of what I'm taking from this, knowing that we spent collectively with all of the meetings close to 10 hours on this. So, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, well, all of the time that 3 of us spent on this, and we spent detailed time and in-depth conversations with ASBA. Now I sort of feel like your take on it is, well, that's nice, but I don't like the way you guys are operating. And that's somewhat hurtful because we invested a lot in this.
Yeah, this was originally brought to the board January 28th, 2019. We had some discussion at that meeting and decided to table it. After that meeting, we coordinated with ASBA, had 2 facilitators come up. We scheduled 2 special meetings just to discuss this. They were work study meetings on February 25th and on April 17th. Both those meetings went the full 3 hours. So there's another 6 hours there that we had discussion, give and take, dialogue, questions, answers, working with the 2 ASBA facilitators. They actually, at the February meeting, had they had this all prepared. They had a 33-slide PowerPoint presentation, and we basically walked through every slide that was every bullet point that was on the current protocols. Stopped, had discussion, take this out, put this in. You know, as a board, we worked very well together putting this together. If I can refer back to the board minutes from the January 28th meeting, the previous superintendent, Dr. Burdick, made the statement that this is a board document. And I think the board members at that time took it to heart, and we really worked on this over the course of the two special meetings, the meeting in February, and then the meeting in June. We discussed it again before we officially approved it. To go back to the January 28th board minutes, when we were discussing site visit protocol, Member Hatcher made a statement, and it's in the minutes, and she said she has a sense that something is going on here that she's missing. She's wondering what's driving all of this redoing and revising of everything. She's worked in the schools for 20 years. What is driving this? It's almost as if something has happened that is driving this serious revisiting of these things. She wondered what is going on underneath. I would say Member Hatcher's comments ring true right now. What's going on? It'd been one thing to send this out as, hey, start of the new year, just take a look, review the site visit protocol, review the communication protocol, you know, which we have already discussed communication protocol not too long ago in a meeting, that instead of having ASBA come up and help us with policy, we had to have legal counsel. So I agree with Member Busby. I don't understand, with all the other balls we're juggling as a school district, why at this time, at this stage, somebody decided, let's rewrite these protocols for the board, when it's beyond their authority to do so, as again, this is a board document. This is our document.
Yeah, Member Brown and Member Busby, again, as I mentioned, the attempt was to revisit this, to adjust it, to clarify with the board and the board superintendent team moving forward. It is the board's document. I'm aware of, I read a lot of those minutes and all the work and the 10 hours and the presentations that went into it. And so, again, there's not one event that triggered this. Having been the superintendent for 1 year, I thought it was appropriate that we revisited these, that we readopted them, that we spoke and discussed it. So, but it certainly wasn't to say the board's work was poor or terrible or anything like that. So that wasn't the intention at all. I apologize if that's how it was perceived. This is a very good document. As you've seen on the first two sections, there were some minor things changed. I already mentioned on the site protocol, we'll go back on number 3 and reword that, even if we just need to revert to previous language that was used and how the board was working, we can certainly do that. But again, there's nothing nefarious. I thought it was appropriate during the organizational meeting to revisit our communication protocol and board meeting norms and site visit protocol, especially in light that we haven't done it with board members who have been on the board 1 year because we've been trying to keep schools open and dealing with other things that you guys mentioned are definitely more important.
To revisit and review is one thing. To bring wholesale changes that's not your authority to change is something else. And I don't know how members Busby and Hatcher feel about this, but the prior board and superintendent, we spent the time at meetings to put this together, a working document, so it would be from the board, so the board could use it. You know, we had the two separate meetings with the ASBA facilitators that was not free. We paid for that as a district. So you're basically throwing all that away because you want to make a couple of changes on a document that you don't have really the authority to change. So yes, you could see the perception is poor.
Yeah, Member Brown, I'll just say I don't think it's a question of authority, and I'm not saying that I have the authority. We work together as a superintendent board team, so I was simply bringing your document back. If the board chooses collectively not to change anything and to continue 2019, we'll continue as is, that's,
Member Hatcher was a
Certainly
member of that board in 2019. I'd like to hear if she has any comments about this.
I can see, I can definitely see where you're coming from, because we did develop that. And, it's been my experience and belief that the group develops their own norms, whether it's this board or whatever group, they develop norms under which they operate. And so I agree on that. I also, I don't think you were trying to be nefarious either. So, I frankly didn't think about it that way. So, so listening to the two board members and what you said, Dr. Monroe, are you suggesting then that we throw everything out and start over, or that we, well, I don't think you are, because you just said you'll leave it as we worked it, if that's our wish. And it's
yeah, I'm correct. I'm not suggesting that. And again, collectively, if the board feels like, hey, there's nothing wrong with our 2019 protocol, we can continue with that. That's certainly fine. As the superintendent, again, I want to honor the board's work. A lot of time was put into it. And again, changing executive leadership team to cabinet or taking off AZ Merit, those are minor changes that can still be made with the current structure of the norms that were approved in 2019. We can certainly stick with those. I thought, looking at some of the board feedback on their self-evaluation for the next document would be a good addition if the board wanted to discuss that. However, that's certainly not necessary. The idea is not to pull the rug out from under anyone, but to work more effectively as a board superintendent team. So if that was if that's perceived that I was trying to discredit the board's work, that certainly wasn't my intention tonight bringing this.
Since I was out of state at the December meeting and had to call in, and maybe I missed, well, I won't say maybe, I missed quite a bit of the meeting because the communication for a call-in was pathetic. Couldn't hear the speakers, couldn't hear the people presenting items. Even in the executive session, it was poor at best. So maybe this was discussed in the executive session, maybe it was discussed in the board meeting, and I just couldn't hear it, or I missed it. But I don't understand. It's one thing to just review the document. Hey, new year. Boom. Every business has to do the same thing. You got to sign the waiver, do this, do that. I all understand that. But one thing, like I said, one thing it is to review. The next thing, to make changes. If in the past meeting, if I missed the piece that in discussion with the superintendent that the board says, hey, we've got some issues, communication, site visits, can we look at this? And I did not hear that, well, then that's shame on me on the poor connection. But if none of this has happened, and like you said, if there was no issues to the current protocol, then I don't understand the busy work of making the changes. And at that rate, if you're going to do it with this protocol, then are we to assume every policy that's a Cave Creek Unified School District specific policy, you're going to review and we're going to hammer out 80, 90, 100 different policies over the next year because either we haven't reviewed them timely or you don't like it and we want to make a change to something. I just don't understand. Like I said, we've got a lot of other things going on, and if Cabinet spent a lot of time on this, I apologize. I do not mean to hurt anybody's feelings. I just would have thought our time could have been better spent doing something maybe a little more important to the students.
We're not adopting this, though. That's what we're doing, discussing the edits to it for
to be
next
brought
board.
back at the next meeting for vote to adoption.
Correct.
So personally, I don't think we need to change it. I think the protocols are working fine, and I think we need to move along. Now, unless you can specifically state issues with communication or site visits, that these current 5 board members have violated, or we've gone against our own policy or protocol here, then okay, then we need to have that discussion. But if there's nothing in the pipeline that somebody stepped out of line here, then this is a moot point. The 2 current protocols are fine. They've been reviewed, updated several times over the course of their life, most recently June of 2019, and it's time to just move along. We got other business to worry about than these 2 items.
I agree. I think it is probably time to move along now, yeah.
Yeah. And just for the record, I'm not insinuating that there was any nefarious anything under this. It was just, I need to understand what the genesis of this was. And so,
I'm sorry, Member Fortney, I didn't hear your.
I just said I agree. I just think it's time to move along. We've been talking about this. They're saying that they have a problem with it. We're taking away from other things now. So yeah, maybe we should just move along then.
So, President Hatcher, we can certainly continue the 2019. I would like to update some things like executive leadership team to cabinet or wordsmith and take off AZ Merit. But we can take that 2019 document and just continue to govern ourselves, under those documents, if that's kind of the will of the board. There's no vote tonight. It sounds like it was approved in 2019 in June, but I could bring it back to the board and we can just do some of those cosmetic revisions and change those things just so it's a little more timely with how we're calling things.
I'd be curious to know, since the 3 of us did work on this document, how the other 2 feel. I mean, are you guys good with accepting the work we did? Or do you see a need to?
I don't see huge differences. I mean, the wording on number 3 is different. And again, I personally like the clarity of number 3, but I see how the previous one is. I don't have a problem with it. If nobody else has been having a problem with it, I'm good. So,
And I guess either way, it would be a vote on the next one anyways with what changes are made versus not made. Or does it just get scratched altogether? Is that your, from not even being on agenda next meeting?
Well, at a minimum, yeah. I mean, it could be scratched altogether, and there could just be the assumption that when it says executive leadership team, that means the cabinet, which is the same thing. However, it does say like AZ Merit, where we could replace that. So it doesn't necessarily need to come for a board vote. But again, it was done in 2019, and it was just my intention to bring it back to the board, especially with you guys completing your first year, to revisit and see how we needed to improve. And I had made some of those suggestions that we were going to talk about. So we can certainly just revert and continue. We can add to the document, that it was reviewed or spoken of. And just keep the same document that we had.
is it possible then to come back with those things saying here are the minor, not content changing edits, but just the cosmetic changes? Everything else is the same, but we've changed these things because of this, and that's it. The original matter is still intact. Is that
Yes.
what we can then do on January 24th?
Yes, Member Forty, that's possible.
I'd go with that then.
Yeah. I think wording edits are important so that words are called what the, so things are referred to as what they're referred to. But
So President Hatcher, with that in mind, I appreciate the discussion. It was very helpful. I appreciate everyone's input. I hope we have some clarity and some consensus. I apologize if my intentions were misconstrued. I don't think we need to continue with this conversation or with the added document that I had kind of added from the board self-evaluation. I think we can probably move on.
So to summarize, we're remaining with this document. You're just going to change the language to cabinet or leadership team, cabinet, and the AZ merit update to
Yeah,
correct that.
I'll go back to the original and just add some of those to Member Walker's input. So I'll go to the original language and we'll just do kind of a strike through so the board can see it where it says just cabinet executive leadership team. So what I'll bring is a clean copy, and then I'll also bring the other copy right next to it that just has the strike through. That way it's completely transparent.
Okay, so that'll come on our next,
Thank you.
next meeting to vote on.
Thank you.
All righty, so we're finished. Item 5, action consent, there is none. Item 6, old business, there is none. Item 7, new business. 7.1, election of board officers, presented by me, as outlined in Arizona Revised Statute 15-321 and Governing Board Policy BDA. The Governing Board of the Cave Creek Unified School District Number 93 will hold an organizational meeting Monday, January 10th, 2022, at 6 p.m. in the Governing Board room for the purpose of electing a Governing Board President and Vice President. The elected President of the Board will take office upon election, and he or she will then proceed with the election of a Vice President. Following that election, the Governing Board will be asked to choose an ASBA delegate and an alternate to represent the district for the 2022 calendar year. So the recommendation is that we elect a president and then proceed with the election of a vice president. Then after the election, the board will choose the ASBA delegate and an alternate for the 2022 calendar year. So we'll take nominations for each office separately and vote on them, and then we'll proceed to the next nomination and voting for the subsequent offices. So nominations are now in order for the office of president.
Well, then I would like to speak up and say that for the past year, this board has faced a lot of issues, very important issues, and because our state refuses to fund the districts adequately, we've had to deal with budget cuts. A lot of difficult decisions had to be made. And then whether to discuss masks raised public ire again. Through it all, President Hatcher has steadfastly helmed this board. She's worked diligently to keep course. She put in her time, she does her homework, and keeps the focus on the students and staff in the community. I appreciate and admire her efforts, so I nominate her to be reelected as president of the Cave Creek Unified School Board. Thanks.
I would like to nominate Member Brown. He has been a steadfast member of this board. He has an uncanny ability to maintain records and has a depth of knowledge for the history, where we've been, and where we've been will guide into the future. He provides clarity and objectivity with much of his discussion, and I think that it's an opportunity to allow the board new perspectives.
Member Brown, do you accept that nomination?
Yes, I do.
Okay, are there any other nominations? Okay, last call for that. All right, so we will vote in the order of the nominations. All in favor of Member Hatcher, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Abstain. All right, so 3 ayes, 2 nays. That sort of takes care of that. Nominations are now in order for the office of Vice President. I'm going to jump in here. I would nominate Member Fortney again because the Vice President acts as the clerk of the board. And we've been operating under the AG's strict guidelines in terms of the minutes in executive session. And Member Fortney's minutes have been quite detailed. So I would offer that nomination. Do you accept that nomination?
Yeah.
Are there further nominations? Okay, going twice, I'll ask it one more time. Are there further nominations for the office of Vice President? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of Member Fortney, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Abstained? I didn't hear you, Member Walker. Did you? Okay, so that's a 4-1. Nominations are now in order to choose an ASBA delegate. Do we have nominations or volunteers?
I would nominate Mr. Fortney.
I'd do that again. That was fun.
Are there additional nominations? So you're accepting that nomination, okay. Additional nominations? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of Mr. Fortney serving as our ASBA delegate, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstained? All right. Mr. Fortney will be the ASBA delegate. Nominations are now in order to choose an ASBA alternate. Are there volunteers or nominations from the floor?
I would like to nominate Brianna to be the alternate.
Do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other names put forward? All right, hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right. Member Walker is the ASBA alternate. And that closes the elections. Item 8, future agenda items. There are none. Item 9.1, adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.